Hi Utkarsh, thank you for doing this. Today we'll have a general conversation about the ins and outs of backend development. This is basically from a standpoint that if a fresher from college or someone in their early career wishes to explore backend development as a career option, what should they be doing? So, to start with, let's talk about what are the key roles and responsibilities of a backend developer working in a company on a production grade system. And you can bank in on your experience that what does it take for a backend developer in big tech companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, etc.
Interesting question. Thank you for asking this. So, if you're working at a company which works at scale, right?
Yeah.
So, when I say scale, millions of requests coming in
Mm.
per second, right? So, you're bestowed with a lot of responsibilities that you should be taking care of. And I think these are not just tasks in your sprint board that you're, responsible to be working with. So, these are responsibilities. It is your utmost responsibility to write scalable and maintainable code in production-based systems since the work that you'll be doing, it will impact millions of users. Even a single irresponsible line of code can can put the company's
Hmm.
reputation, the company's trust at stake with the client that it is
Right.
operating with. And this trust is always it's going to be compromised forever. So especially when you're working at scale at companies
Yes.
that you talked about,
Yeah.
so that time you have to be really really responsible that your code is scalable and it's fault tolerant also. Now, so as I said, the ultimate goal is to
Hmm.
write scalable, fault tolerant, performant, reliable, and secure code.
Right.
Now talking about the specifics, like what are the key responsibilities that
Right.
you would typically have in a day as a software engineer, primarily working in backend, is so when you think about it, you would probably think that coding is the most important thing, which is not. It is a myth. So it's just the 30%, probably if not more or less. It's the 30% of the work that you do on a daily basis as an engineer. So the rest 70%, it probably goes into understanding the requirements of the work,
Hmm.
first thing,
Exactly.
and then creating, like, you have to present your work to the wider audience internally, etc. And you should get the design review vetted by your team, and then creating documentation around it, manually testing it, writing the integration test cases, covering that with the unit test cases, and you would also want to do the code review. So this is also one of the criteria that we
Hmm.
gauge, that
Hmm.
you should be doing continuous code reviews by your peers, and your revisions also should not exceed two, probably, for a code review.
Right.
So there are tons of responsibilities that you are bestowed with when you're working in a product-based company where you're working at scale. So yeah,
Right. So basically, it's not just writing lines of code, it's about
yeah.
building the design and then keeping in mind scalability, reliability, and other components. So if someone wants to explore this, what are the key tech stack that one can look at, and what are the resources that one can use to explore backend development at a very initial stage?
So first of all, if you are at a very initial stage, as you emphasized here,
Yeah.
so the first thing probably is to pick a programming language. It can be
Right.
anything. It can be Python, can be Java. I mean, that is immaterial in my
Right.
opinion. So once you're familiar with the fundamentals, so it's going to be the same across different
Hmm.
programming languages. So once
Yeah.
you're accustomed with one, so you can start with the design for that. So you can latch on to different resources. For example, as I recall, there are a couple of good YouTube channels. So I personally have been benefited by Arpit Bayani ka Asli
Hmm.
Engineering channel.
Hmm.
So he's delved deep into the design decisions that you would take typically
Yes.
in a day as a software engineer. And there is this Java Brains by Kaushik. There is the one by Christopher, which is design patterns in object oriented programming. So this is one. There are many good courses in Pluralsight and DataCamp, which are
Okay.
equally good for freshers and for experienced folks. And to name a few books that you can read, one is System Design Interview by Alex Yu. I've read that book. a couple of times, and every
Hmm.
time I learn something new. So it helps you to make design choices better, like which technology probably best suits this use case. You would
Hmm.
understand
Yeah.
uh, widely if you read that book. And it also depends upon which tech stack that you would want to pick. So if you're more interested into Node.js, for example, so there is this complete Node.js by Andrew Mead. This is one course that is very openly available. And if you are interested in Django, for example, so Django for Beginners by William Vincent is one.
So
So
how do you even select
there's
the tech stack? How do you select the tech stack? For example, if there's someone who has not worked in backend development before, and what is the most popular, what is mostly asked by companies right now? So how should one go about picking that?
okay. So you want to know which tech stack to pick. So
Yeah.
there are two scenarios as a fresher, I believe. So
Hmm.
one is you want to learn about a tech stack, and one is
Right.
you want to build a particular application that you've probably heard of. To give a
Hmm.
classical example, you want to build a chat application, for example.
Right.
So typically a chat application would have technologies like Node.js integrated with Socket.io, since it uses web sockets for communication, and
Hmm.
then MongoDB, Redis for storing cache, JWT for authentication, Docker for containerization. So these are the things that are that should be there for this particular application,
Hmm.
right? Now there can be another fresher who has probably heard about few jargons like serverless architecture, for example.
Yeah.
He wants to delve deep into AWS Lambda. So
Right.
you can read about it, and then you can create a side project for this. So this is
Hmm.
another way to take care of this. So you can, so if like as I gave this example, you want to learn
Hmm.
about serverless architecture. In that case, you can create this very simple application for blogs, just to start off with.
Hmm.
It's more important to start off, in my opinion.
Right. Right.
It's also very important to make bad decisions if you are a fresher.
Yeah.
So only if you have experience in making bad decisions, only then you will be able to make good decisions
Hmm.
in the future. So unless you don't have experience, if you don't start, if you just stay at
Yeah.
one
You
point
pick.
thinking that,
Yeah. Agreed.
yeah,
You figure out the next step once you take a step. So you mentioned a couple of system design resources. So would you recommend a fresher to start understanding the system design from the start, or would you say more of a trial and error approach and then figuring out going to system design later?
I I I'll tell you what I did.
Yeah,
Initially, I started off with hit and trial, and
right.
then I could see that this particular approach is not scalable. If you
Yeah,
want to deploy this in
yeah.
production, this probably will not work. And this
Hmm.
is where you latch on to standard resources and
Right.
understand why this is a bad approach.
Yeah,
Understanding why this did not work is equally important to using right
exactly.
technology for this.
Yeah.
So only when you know why this is wrong, and only when you know why this is a better way to do it, do the same thing in a more
Hmm.
fault tolerant, in a more scalable way. Only then you'll be able to make good decisions in future
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
So hit and trial followed by diligent. The followed by diligence is more important, not just hit
Hmm.
and trial.
Mix of both, yes. So
Yes,
coming to
mix of both.
side projects, so you
Yeah.
mentioned a blogging application as a very starter side project, but now let's suppose someone is a little into the backend development journey and they wish to differentiate themselves in their resume. So then what kind
Okay.
of side projects do you recommend and what are the good components of a good side project when you're presenting to a interview panel?
If you're presenting to an interview panel,
Yeah,
I would highly recommend not to create these cliche projects like
right.
to-do list or blog application or
Mm-hmm.
personal website, to name a few. So it's for you to learn, but if you are presenting it, this is going to project your abilities to the interviewer panel, right? So in that case, you should create few good projects in your areas of interest. For example, you create one Java application, which is like hospital management system. Just to give an example,
Mm-hmm.
and you mention, I mean, create proper documentation around it, probably in your
Yeah.
read dot. in your read.me file where
Documentation. So how important is documentation also? Many times
okay,
people underplay documentation.
it's very important because your piece of code or whatever you've built should be reusable by your colleagues also. So it's very important to write code which is readable and also cover that with proper documentations for others to reuse that. It's not
Hmm.
just that you've built something and it is working and it's deployable and scalable and others are not able to leverage that for their use cases. So
Yes.
make it as reusable as possible and properly document that, which makes it better
Hmm.
as engineers. So
Yeah.
also, there's one more thing that you should be taking care of. If you're creating any side project also,
Right.
I would recommend you to host it on any platform. You can use AWS or Azure or whatever.
Hmm.
Create, I mean, bare minimum of it and then deploy it somewhere for people to
Right.
see and check what you have built and put the link for that on your resume and
Hmm.
also cover that with the integration and unit test cases, which also tells you that you are good with TDD.
Right. So, right, it should be an end-to-end project, right from
Yes,
documentation, design, implementation to deployment. And one more thing
because
I
that is what
really,
a
yeah,
usual day looks like in an
yes,
engineer's life, right?
yes,
So
yes,
it's not just the coding. You start off with
exactly.
requirements gathering till your maintainability of the code.
Right.
Everything has to be documented and
Yeah. And this is like the basic building block, I feel, on which,
yes,
yeah. And
right,
another thing I really liked what you said is the coding language that you pick does not matter because at the end of the day, the concepts remain the same. So basically, the syntax and others, some nuances change. So also,
right.
there's a lot of conversation ongoing on if someone wants to get into a big tech company as a developer, be it backend or front end, are side projects necessary or is doing DSA necessary? What do you think? What's your take on it?
So it's kind of a very hot topic.
Yeah,
Um, and you put me into a spotlight. I believe both are equally important and both goes hand in hand. I believe DSA is important because how would you guard someone? So there are plethora of technologies that are
right.
there in the market. Somebody knows Node.js, somebody knows
Mhm.
Java. So
Yes.
you cannot be asking questions to someone who is more familiar with Node.js pertaining to Java, right? So there has
Right.
to be some standardized way of gauging the capabilities of the candidate. So in
Mhm.
that case, data structures, if you see across languages, across frameworks, are the same.
Hmm.
They do not vary. So it's just a way to store and structure data. That's
Yes.
it, and it's going to be the same across different languages. And algorithms are important because they tell you how smartly would you optimize the code, be it the time and space complexity. How would you make it more performant, better
Mhm.
performant, and better scalable?
Hmm.
So algorithms and data structures are pretty important, and then they are, in my opinion, the right measure of the
Mhm.
software engineers' capabilities. And
Yeah, I feel DSA is important because it builds your problem solving abilities because in spite of anything that you do, the core skill is problem solving, and then there are other things on top of that. So DSA, a solid DSA understanding helps you anywhere, I feel.
can't agree more. Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if you have built a strong hold of DSA, it's
Yeah.
important to project those skills into your side project so you can
Yeah.
leverage whatever you've learned with your journey of practicing data structures and
Hmm.
algorithms. You can be solving problems on lead code, and once you are proficient with data structures, you should be able to leverage that into your side project that you'll be building, and that will
Hmm.
showcase how good of a software engineer that you are to the interviewers, and that will really help you to crack good companies.
Okay, yeah, that was all I had. Thank you for all the valuable insights, and we'll end the episode here.